Hi there, everybody, and welcome to July's Ask Me Anything about digital wellbeing, screen time, cyber psychology, and all the things to do with humans putting their faces in screens and goggles and devices. I'm Jocelyn Brewer. I'm a psychologist, and I founded this thing called Digital Nutrition way back in 2013, nearly 10 years ago. I would like to start tonight's session just by recognizing that I'm out here on the lands of the Wongal people of the Eora Nation. White fellas call it Burwood. And I'd like to really recognize that I'm a beneficiary of the dispossession of First Nations Australians whose land was never ceded. So to recognize elders past, present, and emerging, and to pay my respects to First Nations people who might be joining our call today, to recognise that they were kind of some of the first technologists 65,000 plus years ago. So tonight we've got a range of questions again. This is the second time I've done one of these, but the advice is general in nature, and it's not intended to replace that of like a primary treating physician or psychologist, especially if some of the questions are related to that mental health field. Some of it's just philosophical, and there's one question that's a little bit gossipy too. It's mostly private, but I'm hoping that a parent is going to jump on who asked a question last session and then wasn't able to make it. So we will keep any kind of conversations that we have a little bit de-identified just for that privacy aspect. Like with all of my work, take what you need. They're suggestions, not gospel. It's ways of thinking about things to really help you think more broadly and dynamically about some of these issues. So let's kick off. The first part was really about thoughts on threads, and people were saying, what do you think? What's going on? I even just had a message then by somebody who said, I've got splinters in my bum from sitting on the fence about threads. Look, my first reaction is, humanity really does not need this. But it's great for my business, right? It's great for the idea that people are going to have constant problems with managing technology when there's so much technology still being, and we're not even talking about technology here. We're talking about a crappy platform that isn't fully hatched. Like, it doesn't even have hashtags yet. There's a lot of the functionality that maybe in 2010 when I got Twitter, I would have, not expected, but by now we really kind of think some of those things are required. I was surprised that it doesn't have hashtags, and some of the things within it, the way that it's working and the way that information is showing up is quite interesting. I like really didn't want to get it, like really. But then I was just feeling massive FOMO. And as I put in my newsletter today, FOMO is always made to seem quite judgy, like, oh, you're so scared of missing out. But actually, I would reframe that to be, we are designed to connect and belong. We are designed to want to be a part of something and know what's going on, have some of that information that helps us be in the in-group, I guess. So I definitely got huge FOMO, and I definitely clicked on the link and got an account. But I was really loath to kind of delve back in, partly because personally over about the last 5 or 6 weeks, I've had a bit of a transformation with the way that I use technology, because I spent 7 days off the internet and I did a whole bunch of kind of deep work, psychologically speaking. I had a beautiful week at a retreat. I really just don't have the appetite for the what I'm calling TMII, too much irrelevant information. Because I think part of that too much information and too much irrelevant information is just why we are so tired but wired. Our brains are foggy. We are not feeling good generally as a kind of species, I think. So yeah, look, I'm not keen on it. I'm not keen on feeding the meta-ogliopoly. I'm not keen on feeding Musk's narcissistic wound for how big it's gotten and how upset. I don't know whether he's really upset, but some of those kinds of characteristics. I really, really don't want to see any more kind of tweet style thoughts repurposed as content, like the whole I put it on Threads and then I share it onto Instagram. It's like people who share their posts in stories, like just don't do it. You're adding to the noise. And you obviously can't choose to not follow posts that do that. So if I've read it on Threads, I don't want to see it on Instagram. Maybe I don't want to see it at all. So there's not really good ways to appraise what's going on there. I think a lot of people think it might come and go a little bit like Clubhouse, which I kind of got into. I thought was really fun and interesting and spent a lot of time in. But for me, Twitter was never really terrible. Like, yes, I did in the last kind of, I don't know, a couple of months, whenever it was, it started down now, being trolled by people around, or one particular person, around my attitude to the need to teach digital well-being skills. But generally, I haven't had issues with Twitter, and that's possibly because I have a particular kind of niche with lots of teachers and like a particular aspect of Twitter that really hasn't impacted me. So I wasn't feeling like Twitter was a dumpster fire. I was just feeling like I need less of all social media generally. So it'll be really interesting to watch. I've also heard that some people would say that, we're really just feeding Meta's natural language AI models so that they have, Meta has gone from like literally wanting to build the metaverse to abandoning that and jumping towards the ChatGPT style thing. So there's lots going on in the background if you have time to read about it. There's, some questions about privacy and settings for young people and things like that. Generally, my thought is we just don't need it. And if you can avoid it and not get sucked into the negative end of the FOMO, like, oh, your business won't grow or you won't reach new leads or, all of that kind of stuff, that scarcity mentality and the missing out mentality, like something's going to pass you by, then I would encourage you not to go on there. As I replied to my friend Erin via email just before, I feel like it's a way to distract us and lobotomize us. It's making us really asleep at the wheel, more asleep at the wheel than I think that we've ever been, because of we're still in awe of the internet. Van Badham wrote a really great article that again is in my newsletter that went out today, all about this. So enough on Threads. As I said in the newsletter, don't get chained to Threads. So yes, that's Threads. IP and trademark. So this one came through. It was a bit of a sneaky one, actually, but I will happily answer this. Somebody asked me, how is your relation to AZBZ? I don't even know how to say that. ABZ Labs, knowing that they were using your concept. So basically what they're talking about is the Mood Rise app and the fact that Digital Nutrition, which is my trademark in Australia, launched this kind of digital nutrition product, and it was an app that literally would take you through, you can see a bit of a screenshot there, different kind of, it was basically like different stories that were trying to generate, serotonin or dopamine or GABA and things like that. And so I get where this person's coming from, because when that happened and there was digital nutrition popping up in the US, I contacted the owner, Michael Moskovitz, thanks to Google Alerts, which I have set up, by the way, on basically all of the keywords in my space and all of the people in my space, actually, just to see what's happening, not in a stalky, weird way, but just, that's how I get fed information that I want to get. And I actually became mates with Michael to the degree that we had lots of conversations about it and where it was going. And he even introduced me to Kelly, who I started Metaversal Wellbeing with. So because I couldn't afford, when I got my trademark in, when was it? Probably 5 or 6 years ago, I actually couldn't afford to trademark it in more countries. It was going to be $15,000 for me to trademark in the US. And I have to prove that I am using the trademark. So if you're not using it, you can't just go around trademarking stuff. So I couldn't really prove that because I couldn't, and still haven't, expanded my business suddenly to the US. I guess the kicker here is that ABZ Labs was then sold to a company called IRL, probably late last year. Michael sold up and has moved on. But they've recently closed down because 90% of its users were actually fake. So you've got an app called IRL, which was promising all of these real interactions, closing because they didn't have real users. So it's effectively debunked and defunct, and never went very far. So yeah, it was a kind of bit stressful at the time, I guess, because I didn't know who Michael was and he turned out to be a cool human. There is another trademark on digital nutrition for this kind of weird device that apparently maps vibrations and does all this woo-woo stuff called the Healy device. So they have digital nutrition as an app, and that's trademarked like almost across the entire world. And there's some issues with their trademark or their attempt to get that trademark here. So I am constantly doing stuff like that in the background. But that's basically the answer to that question. So I don't think, from what my discussions were with Michael, I think we just both spontaneously came up with it. He claims to not have known what I was doing. And look, safety in numbers sometimes. And you can see, I guess, a few years later where that's ended up. So that's the IP and trademark stuff. Spriggy. Now, I do have the parent that I was hoping would turn up online. So if you wouldn't mind just going on to off mute, you don't need to put your camera on if that's okay. You were asking, and from last session, you had the 9-year-old who started an Instagram account. We spoke a little bit about that, but then you said they got a Spriggy account. So for people who don't know, Spriggy is this kind of pocket money app. I knew about it, and then I Googled it to actually have a look at how do you sign up today. And literally 10 minutes later, when I turned on Instagram, it gave me an ad for Spriggy. So you can see that's a really important example of how what we Google is being sold directly to those companies that then advertise to us. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about the situation, keeping it kind of de-identified. So I'll ask you a few kind of questions if you don't mind, just so we can get to the bottom of it, but you don't have to go, tell us exactly who you are.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. Where do you want me to start?
Yeah. Well, what question do you need answered in, the next
sorry.
while?
Because I did ask a question before.
Yeah.
So I wanted to work out how my 9-year-old could order a Spriggy credit card, because we got the shock of our lives.
Yeah. Did you go into the
mailbox.
Spriggy account website? Have you looked at the site?
Honestly, I haven't done it yet, but
yeah, because I did that this afternoon when I was prepping. I literally just went to Spriggy, and they typed in your name and your birth date. That's what they did.
Oh.
So if you took yourself through the process, if your kid's done this, then I would suggest you probably want to spend some time doing it yourself.
Yeah, we've still unplugged our child, so I haven't actually.
So I think, kind of thinking back to what I sort of said in the last session and what you had indicated, that unplugging has backfired. I would get as curious as they are, because obviously. To actually get the card sent to you. So what I could see, without putting my own details in and ordering one, which I just don't need, I could see that basically to sign up, all you needed was the adult's name and date of birth, and then the name that you wanted the card in for the child. Now, all that's going to do is basically, I presume, send you a card. You then have to link it to your bank account. And so if you have paper statements, you have your card sitting around, my guess is that your kid's gone to your wallet, taken that information out, typed it in, and set it up.
Okay.
Now we can look at this from you've broken my trust, you've touched my belongings. That's not okay. Yeah.
Yep.
That's probably true. But my suggestion would be to go, wow, let's get really curious. Why did you feel you needed to do that? Why did you do that? And my guess would be, if they had have come to you and said, hey, Mom, can I please have Instagram? You would say no. If they said, hey, can I have a Spriggy account? I want to get pocket money. You would say no. So rather than get that no, my guess would be they've gone, and that urge was greater than the values, right?
I think in some investigating we did, I've worked out I unplugged myself from Facebook, because I think Facebook instantly gives you an Insta account, and that's how I think my child created one of her own. by just attaching herself to my account because it assumes you're an adult. So she bypassed the age thing,
Yeah.
and she
So
probably went to my profile to get my
yeah,
date of
you
birth.
have to kind of start your own. It doesn't automatically give you an Instagram account. You have to create an Instagram account that can be linked. So then you can use it through Meta Business Suite. It is quite complex, but like if you have your phone open and your kid is quite savvy and can navigate their way around, then they've set that up. I guess, that's neither here nor there. It depends on then what information they were accessing, right? Were they then able to, I don't know, what are our fears here? Is it that they're going to see some negative content? Is it that they're going to talk to strangers? What were the concerns?
The concerns were she, although very savvy in creating the account, wasn't savvy in what she didn't she put her name, her school, so very personal information as her describer. And she's saying, "No, Mum, look, it's a private account." I said, "No, but you've put this as open," because my sister-in-law alerted me when her son saw it.
Yeah.
So I think that was my concern. Although she has a lot of maturity to work, she doesn't have the maturity of that, as well as like the spriggy, like putting in your home address. That's not safe. So
well,
that's
you're giving it to a bank, I guess. So putting your home address into a website that then sends you a bank card.
Yeah.
Like we put out, it's amazing how much we put our information into sites and we share all of this information. I guess what strikes me, I'll tell you a funny little story. When I was probably about 8, there was this girl on the bus who lived a few doors down who was really mean to me on the bus. And me and the girl across the road wrote a very mean letter to her, calling her names and saying, "You should be nice to people on the bus." And I thought I was being really clever, bullying her back. What I didn't think of was how I was using some scrap paper that was from my dad's company that he worked for. And on the back, it was like the old letterhead. So you turned it over and it had Avery Scales. And my dad drove a car that on the side said Avery Scales. And so very quickly that parent marched on up to our house and said, "Why are you bullying my daughter?" And we were in so much trouble. So little kids, I kind of describe this in some of my courses, kids kind of have a little torchlight on their forehead, and it's like a little miner's torch or a little candle, and they think they can see the way ahead. They think, I've outsmarted mum and dad, and they won't work things out. But we have kind of like bright torchlights, and we can see a lot more than they can. So this, I would say, is a really good learning opportunity on a range of things. 1 is about trust. 2 is about safety. And then it's about, for you guys, actually kind of being able to get ahead of things. Like, for instance, working out how does a 9-year-old get an account. I literally would have to Google it and apply and work it out. Like, that's what I did this afternoon. So I would encourage parents to really put themselves in the driver's seat and say, well, if I'm going to let my kid get the Threads app, right, which we talked about tonight, I need to be able to use that myself. I need to know the functionality of that. I need to know the basics of it, because if I can't drive it and I'm putting my 9-year-old in the driver's seat, am I okay with that?
Now, I think we, in the whole saga, we tried to, nut out how she did it, and she kept saying she didn't know how. And I did bring up fraud and everything because she had to be 13. But trying to shut it down was also funny, because how many because you can remember the password and things. So I did discover there's an older child in her class that has an account, and she wanted to communicate with her. And I think she's at the age where she just wants to be like everyone else, or ahead of everyone else. So that's part of it. But we're still working it out.
That's the FOMO part that I was saying about even before with when I was talking about the Threads app. I'm not sure if you were on just then. But, that fear of missing out, that fear of not belonging, the fear of not being a part of something, the fear of everybody else is listening to that CD. It was, for me, listening to that CD or wearing those shoes or reading that Dolly magazine. And now everything moves so quickly. So, within a week, 100 million people signed up to Threads. That's the fastest uptake of any app ever. Like, it was, my stats had like 50 million users, and Angry Birds took 19 days. This was 100 million within 7. So because everything's moving so quickly, kids want to be a part of it. And if they're looking up to other role models or other peers who maybe aren't even that good a role model, then that can get quite tricky. So I guess if you want her to talk to you about it, my suggestion there is to be really open and say, hey, you've done some things that maybe you wouldn't do again, and we, are a bit disappointed in, but we want to stay really open around how we talk about what do you need. So rather than you going off and presuming we're going to say no, how do we negotiate some of that together? I think I can't remember if in the last Ask Me Anything, I put the link to the due diligence report. So like for, let's say, Threads, she's probably a bit too young to really want to be on Threads, but whatever the next app or game is, to actually say, okay, you need to go and do some research on this and tell me who owns it, how do they store your data, boring questions like that we as parents should be doing. And then let's have a conversation about whether or not you really need it, or whether or not there's a better solution to you getting that need for connection met. So
yep.
Thank you. Anything else before we
I've shut this one. I think what we've done so far is just give her some time with Roblox and Minecraft and things like that. But reopening her access is, I think, what we're navigating through. And she suggested, Mummy, why don't you add me as a user on Apple, because Apple family share.
Yeah.
And Mummy, you can control what I do. And I was like, oh, do I? So I'm trying to explore that now as my next step.
I would absolutely spend some time. And by time, I mean a couple of hours, really looking into getting a handle on that. Because if you have your 9-year-old suggesting how to control the apps,
I'm in trouble.
There's certain level of information that she has, but she doesn't have that oversight, right? She doesn't have the adult brain that you have. There are lots of ways that you can have that oversight. I would still say that a 9-year-old playing Roblox is not quite appropriate. Roblox is an over 13s platform, which...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Roblox, I would not. And do you have controls on the Roblox? Do you know what she's doing in Roblox? Do you know what's going on in that?
She's playing by herself, I think. No, actually, she's playing, but I don't know who the other people are.
Yeah.
I've watched her play.
Okay. Does she play in an open area where you always know who she's talking to? Is she using messaging?
Yes. So that's the new rule. It has to be in front of us, not in her bedroom. So I do watch it, and
I would maybe do a little bit of oversight again on Roblox. Roblox would not necessarily be a platform that a 9-year-old I would recommend. I would have a look at the Taming Gaming database. So it's taminggaming.com.
Yep.
And put in the age, put in the device that you want to use, and put in some of the things that she likes doing. So something that's like Roblox for a 9-year-old that you can play on an iPad, and it will give you a range of suggestions.
Oh, I thought it was very benign. It looked a bit like Mario Brothers. Is this little kid just walking through different things? But what's scary is that there are lots of other people in it. So I wasn't sure.
So Roblox is actually not a game. It's a platform. It's probably the closest thing to the metaverse that currently exists. And it has significant issues, like many of the platforms do, with people who are not 9 pretending to be 9. And it depends what you're doing, and it depends on the use of it, and there's a lot to Roblox. So when people say, oh, they're on Roblox, I say, well, that's like saying they're on YouTube. There's a lot of different ways that you can use YouTube. So a little bit of homework for you. I would suggest you just go and have a little look at how to manage Roblox through somewhere like the Family Online Safety Institute, so FOSI, or even through our esafety.gov.au kind of website, and read up a little bit more about Roblox. Kids love Roblox. My 6-year-old talks about Roblox. She has never been on Roblox, has no access to a device with Roblox, but knows what it is and thinks she wants it. So it's a ubiquitous, right? It's like knowing that dogs and cats exist is like knowing that Roblox exists.
Okay. No, thanks for that.
Little bit of homework. Report back next month. Let me know how you go. Fantastic. Thanks. Yes. Okay, next big one here. I got asked about what is digital self-harm, otherwise known as self-trolling, and what can we learn from it? And that's a huge question. I could probably do, an hour-long presentation on it. But this is something that like gets a little bit of attention here and there. And I try and bring it up because it actually probably happens more than gaming addiction or gaming disorder. So we think probably between 5 to 10% of people, mostly young people, participate in digital self-harm, which is a form of self-aggression, which basically involves anonymously posting harmful, mean, hurtful things about yourself online. Sometimes it's known as fictitious online victimization. There's a whole new acronym for you, just when you thought there were too many acronyms. FOV. Or self-cyberbullying. So you literally, go, and there's a lot of anonymous apps or, ways that you can fake who you are or be anonymous and saying, oh my God, like Jocelyn is so, like my troll does, so out of touch, and she doesn't even really have teenagers. So what would she know? She's just so hopeless and blah, 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 right? But generally, it's a lot worse than that. It's like they're so ugly and dumb, and this really, really negative self-talk, which there was actually a really, really sad situation where a young person had completed suicide. And when the police went through to look at the bullying behavior, they found that 90% of the bullying had actually been that young person perpetrating that towards themselves. So you hear some of these situations where it's like really hectic, very intense end of generally what's happening. And I don't want to, belittle that, but most kids are not kind of at that level of where the intention is suicidal. However, because it's such a new area of research, we don't have a lot of data, and so we're not absolutely sure. It's like with many things, there's some people that find, no, it's not related to suicidal ideation and intention, yet other people find that there's clear links. So I've put these two lovely dudes here because this is Justin Patchen and Samir Hinduja. They lead some of this research. Most of the research papers that you find on digital self-harm are from them, or the key papers are from them. They're also really big in the bullying and cyberbullying space. They do incredible work. So meet Justin and Samir. To continue on a little bit, the prevalence, as I said, is probably about 6%. A New Zealand study found it was 6%. In some of the US studies, it's between 5 and 10. It's kind of a little bit similar. It's a little bit less, but not dissimilar from non-suicidal self-injury, NSSI, which is the fancier term for self-harm, because most self-harming behaviors, most commonly cutting, that's what we hear a lot about, but most self-harming behaviors are non-suicidal in intention. They're self-injurious, usually physical self-injury rather than psychological self-injury, but generally non-suicidal. What we find here is it tends to be more prevalent for those who feel ostracized or victimized by their peers. So kids who do feel like nobody likes me actually end up enacting some of these behaviors towards themselves. And it also has a correlation with people that have weak parental attachment. And what parental attachment basically means is the kind of parenting style and warmth. So if there's not that connection with parents, if you don't feel like they're the person that you can go to, talk to and all of those sorts of things, they might be more likely to perpetuate some of these behaviors. Some of the causes that they believe are going on here is around social development. It's about working out who your true friends are. Do your friends come in and then back you up and say, no, she's beautiful and she's smart, or, that's a horrible thing to say. So we're actually looking for the upstanders in those situations. It's a bit of a test. There can be some of the personal gain. So looking for sympathy or attention. Remember that anyone who's looking for attention is actually seeking attachment. So anytime we hear, attention seeking, I want you to flip your brain to attachment seeking. They're looking for secure attachment. They're looking for someone to be there and co-regulate, basically. As mammals, we're designed to co-regulate. And then there's an emotional release. So for a lot of young people, they have unexpressed or internalized emotions that feel gross and they can't actually make sense of. And when regulation skills and emotion regulation skills are low and absent, they might turn to digital self-harm for that emotional release. So similarly, when kids have those really huge feels and they don't know how to make sense of it, and they might give themselves some scratches in order to release some of that emotion. It's similar with, jumping onto a keyboard and saying horrible things about yourself. Okay. Sometimes they talk about, the kids who do this will say, well, I'm going to beat the bullies to the chase. They're going to say this about me, so I'm going to say it before they can. So there's some of that really dysfunctional thinking in there. So what do we do with this? Well, first of all, we want to prevent it and then treat it on the other side. But usually it's about dealing with self-esteem issues, building emotion regulation skills, building social emotional skills, and like just being in the world and dealing with people, dealing with good friends and bad friends and breakups and all of those interpersonal issues. And then having parents with good attachment styles who can have these conversations, who can sit with kids in distress. And that's a really tricky one when you've got any age child, but especially a teenager, like in that kind of emotional pain of a breakup or a friendship, friendship breakups. I think I was saying to a young person today, friendship breakups are probably worse than romantic breakups because for a number of reasons. So that's the kind of way that we would deal with it, is actually not the technology use, but those negative thought patterns, I guess, that young people might have about themselves. So that's a very brief introduction. We're obviously not looking at, kind of things in a huge level of depth, but that hopefully answers that person's questions. And I'll put in the link to the video, some of the research articles and where you can read more. Google Scholar is your best friend, saves you having to get a uni, database access and all of that sort of stuff. There's a lot of free, great articles that you can get a hold of. I might even do a special presentation on that to look at it in more detail. Basically, there's not a lot of research and not a lot of Australian research that looks at exactly what's going on. So yeah, maybe I'll do that when I get bored, go and start a new presentation. I don't know if there's anybody else online, whether there's any other burning questions. If you have one, you can chuck it in the chat or jump in and ask me. We'll have another session in another 4 weeks' time on Wednesday, September 6th. You can work with me in lots of different ways. I can help schools with deploying policy. One thing we haven't talked about is that now all of Australia bans mobile phones in their schools. And there's a lot of different ways to implement a ban, and also make a plan for how to teach some of the skills that when kids go home and binge on their phones, how to deal with it. Parent webinars that you can book via your school for your school community. I do parent coaching one-on-one, face-to-face and online, and lots of courses that you can engage with via the shop page on my website. So if there are no other questions, thank you for coming along, and I will see you in another month. Ciao for now.